Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Showing Up For You. I'm Shon.
And I'm Jasmine.
And we're just happy to be here, guys. Today we are talking about narratives. And as vague as that sound, I'm going to break it down a little bit for you. I think that we all kind of struggle with other people's narratives of us, and they're not always true. And so what me and Jasmine usually talk about offline is our struggle with identifying other people's narratives of us.
Yep.
And what that looks like for us to contribute to those narratives. And I think that's kind of a confusing thing because you never know what people entirely think of you. And it shouldn't matter,
Right.
but let's be realistic because that's what we're here to do. You know, we're kind of like bearing our soul on all this stuff that we internally struggle with. So,
Always.
nakedness, but narratives. So one thing, if I'm honest, I have spent a lot of my adult life, like I would say like late teen years to adult life, deciding to bank on people's narratives of me, not realizing that their narrative isn't necessarily who I am. You know what I mean? It's almost like looking into someone else's mirror of you, or like someone else's reflection of you, and instead of like checking in with self and being like, I'm not that. And we never know like where narratives come from. They can come from someone else's past and what they think you are to them. It can come from an experience they may have had with you that was a misunderstanding, and now to them you are that experience, and therefore everything you do going forward is attached to that experience. There's a lot of different reasons. So today we're just kind of here to talk about what we struggle with and how, I would say for me, I'm learning over the past, I guess in my adult life, like learning how to differentiate that and step out of that. It doesn't mean that I've like graduated entirely.
Right.
Because I think I catch myself caring in a toxic way, not caring in a concerned, man, I sure hope that I'm not contributing to that narrative in this way, but caring in a way of like, man, like I'm gonna compromise me so that you can have a better narrative. So we're gonna talk about where those narratives come from, why they exist, and how we are personally dealing with them. How you feel about today's episode?
Me, just like every
always
episode.
nervous.
I am. I'm always like,
why did I ask?
This is good. I know. I'm like, y'all gonna get the same answer every time until
Let's
you
do
don't,
this.
I guess. I'm so excited to talk about this.
Leaves the house.
Right.
It's just like, I
Peace
gotta
out.
go.
Kick gravel and travel. That's my go-to. With narratives though, what I look forward to in this conversation, and hopefully, it ends up being a larger conversation with you guys, is that I have to be honest, the terms like narrative was really new to me. Like I was super unfamiliar with it, and it's actually been like super helpful for me just like in my life, because you just hear like what's somebody's like opinion of you or whatever, but like a narrative is bigger than just in a moment. Right? Like an opinion can just be like something that somebody's like sees about you, but it's like a narrative can have like such lasting effects. And so I'm really excited for our conversation. Nervous about what's gonna come out of it, just like every single time, but I think it's gonna be great.
I want to start off with, I guess, like a question that it kind of just it bothers me more than anything.
Ooh, let's go.
But what narratives have you experienced about yourself that made you question your truth? And what I mean is like, what narratives have you learned from other people that compromised your everyday life?
Yeah. Love that question, because I think that there's for me like a lot. I think the way that I kind of saw it as like there is certain things about like being like a woman
Mm-hmm.
that you like kind of had to follow,
Mm-hmm.
right? Of like looking like this type of woman to be presented to the world, to
Mm-hmm.
be this kind of wife, you know, in a setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked at like a lot of these narratives and like put them on myself, and it was like really hard on myself of being like, I need to like follow these things
Oh, wow.
in order to like follow this narrative. But I like reached a point that I was like, this just like doesn't feel right.
No, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that was something that I had experienced, but also like in like something more specific to my life is that I had experienced I needed to be like this type of like daughter in a setting, and where that narrative came from still couldn't tell you to this day. But like I think that, you know, people in my life had this idea of the kind of daughter that they wanted, and I don't think I measured up to that. And there was a lot of moments that I would be reminded of that. But like when I met those expectations or what that narrative should have looked like, oh, it was great in that moment. But if there was ever any other moment that I did not measure up to that, it was just like, you know, being reprimanded or,
Right.
you know, why aren't you like this? Or haven't you seen so-and-so, the way that they carry their family? And it's just like, dang, like,
Okay.
I thought that I was just supposed to be me, but like that's not necessarily true. Got it. Cool. So I know like that's something in my life that I've had to like fight so much, because you see, you know, in media or all these things of like, this is what the typical family should look like. This is what, you know, a mother, a daughter, a father, you know, should all look like. And then when you don't fit into that and what that box looks like, it's just like, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a tough spot to be, because, you know, you having that, you knowing that that's a narrative that someone is trying to create for you, and then realizing like, I'm not that and I'm not gonna be that. I think that's such a hard transition too, because you're not, like, it's not like we immediately get there. Like, it's not like we were told by our parents or our family, like, this is what you should be doing, and then we immediately stand up for ourselves and say, but that's just not me.
Right.
Like, that's not what happens. And so that's what I think is like sad, because that's a disconnect. Like, that's such a disconnect.
Yeah.
I spend a long time trying to be that. I spend a long time trying to be what you think I should be. And then when I finally realize like I can't be that, I'm also sacrificing our relationship yet again, because not only have I spent time not being able to please you, but now I just don't care.
Right. And then it's like a super confusing process of even trying to get there. It's just like, well, this whole path makes no sense.
No sense at all.
Yeah.
No sense at all.
But how about for you?
For me, like, I realized a while ago that there are people in my life that see me they have a narrative of me based off of who I was like as a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't been that girl in a long time. Like, she's back there, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, when I was younger, I carried myself differently. And I carried myself in a way of trying to make up for affirmation that I didn't have, or satisfaction in my family, or love that I felt like I didn't have. And, you know, it's not like like fault of one specific person, but I didn't feel seen.
Yeah.
And so I know that as a kid, and I'm talking about like literally under the age of 12, right? There was a kind of kid that I was. And I wanted and needed affirmation and attention.
Yeah.
Middle child syndrome showing up in your area. Not only that, like I'm a twin, but I'm also the second twin. Like, I'm not even the firstborn.
Right. I'm in the middle. I'm
Right.
fighting against
like,
another twin.
I'm fighting for a position, you guys.
Yeah.
But so I know the way that I was. And, you know, then, you know, I hit my teenage years, and I spent a lot of time trying to find me. And that was, I want to say, like between 13 and 16 was such a huge turnaround for me, that I am nothing like that girl.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of my family still judged me off of that. That's the narrative that they had. And so the issue with that is like that their narrative was created based off of who I was as a kid. And then it didn't change. Like, it's like that's still the way they see me.
Yeah.
And so I don't have much room for improvement in a lot of people's eyes. I feel like, because there's ways that people bring things up or respond to me that I'm like, where is that even connecting?
Yeah.
And so, after, a while of doing all this soul searching and therapy, you're like, okay, I figured out my love language is this, and this is what I've been searching for, which is affirmation for me.
Yeah.
But then I even got confused in that because I was like wanting approval. I confused approval and affirmation.
Because they can look synonymous.
They can look the same.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like still subscribing to the narrative and questioning my truths, like what my growth has brought me.
Yeah.
I'm still questioning, like I'm growing and I'm doing the right things, but I'm questioning what I'm doing because you haven't changed your narrative.
Right. You're stuck in that, like,
you're stuck
in that moment.
So when I decide to like focus on my life, put my head down, be a better person, go to college, be a good student, get married, focus on my family, I'm everything but, I'm everything but positive according to your narrative.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because you're still so stuck in that past of
Right.
who I was.
Right. And so when I talk about questioning your truths, is like, if we're not in the right place for ourselves, like if we're not like, confident in ourselves, we then start to question our day-to-day habits. We start to question our goals, our future. And now, like, I'm compromising everything I want to work for because I'm concerned about you.
Yeah.
And it's a sick place to be. It's a sick place to be.
I hate that because, like, from the point of view, I relate to that so much. And, like, from, like, that point of view, it's almost like you were operating in this, like, when you were younger, like almost like a survival type narrative,
Aren't we all, though?
It's like
we're trying to learn how to be human.
Right.
Like,
I'm just trying to make it. I'm trying to make it out.
I just learned how to use a restroom. Like, I'm just trying to be a human.
Just doing my best here.
Right?
But it's like the hope and the goal for hopefully most people is that you move out of survival mode, at some point. But there are some people, sadly, who don't make it out of that. It's like they're frozen, in time, and like that's all that they see. And I relate to that so much. Like, I am 26 years old, and it's like my grandparents don't even know I'm an adult. Yeah. It's
I can see
so
that.
crazy to me.
I can see that.
I'm like, I'm fully
It's weird.
functioning. I have assets.
It's so weird.
This is so bizarre. I can go to the bar and get a drink.
It's like,
you know what I mean? But it's like you just end up continually being treated, in a way. It's like, and I think the weird thing that I notice, like with, narratives in that way is, do you actually want me to be that person? Because it seems like you didn't like them either.
I don't think that's it. I think it's a lot of people don't know how to move on from a situation. A lot of people feel comfortable attaching you to a moment or attaching you to a choice that you made, rather than realizing like that was just a moment or that was a choice. Like you've moved on from that, you learned from that, and you don't have to be that.
Yeah.
A lot of people I just think don't know how to like, I guess separate that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. Like, I want to know how you differentiate someone's narrative of you versus their, like, actual interactions with you.
I think that could be a you problem. And that could be a them problem. So, like, I think narratives are based off of kind of like what I was just saying. It's like my narrative of you is based off of whether I decide to define you by a situation or whether I decide to like attach you to a fault of yours, or whether I just like, I mean, it can be in the best and worst situations. You know what I mean? I'm sure like, murderers are nice neighbors sometimes, and we don't know. You know what I mean? The difference I feel between a narrative and I guess interactions is that, like I said, a narrative is something I can create of you. I can say, Jasmine, every time we get together, you show up late. Every time we get together, you're not on time. And based off of those interactions, I just think that you don't care about my time. I think that you are not a woman of your word, and I think that you have better things to do than to hang out with me. Whereas you might just have a busy life, and that doesn't mean I can't count on you. That doesn't mean that I that you really don't care. It means that I've taken those interactions and like painted you as this person that just does not care.
Yeah.
So that's a me thing, right? That's me creating that narrative.
Right.
Because that's not all Jasmine is. You know what I mean?
I do be late. I'm just gonna put that out there. For comedic
But
relief.
okay, so like for me, like okay, like I got kids. There are so many times I'm on time. And then I will have this 5-minute meltdown right before hitting the door, and I'm like, now we're not on time.
Right.
You know what I mean?
We had it.
And if no one knows that, whoever I'm interacting with, they might be like, why is she late? You know what I mean? So anyway, that is a light way of saying that's the moment that I've created, and that's that person's decision to confine me, in that moment and be like, she's a late person. This is just her.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to interactions, there are times that I feel we can contribute to our personality. Like if I am, if every time we get together, or let's say, every time we sit and record, I'm cranky 10 minutes before, like I'm contributing to that. And there's no wonder you're like, I don't like you the first 10 minutes that you're recording because I'm contributing to that. There's a difference in things that I'm contributing to and you just wanting to paint me as a certain person because of certain interactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely makes sense, because I think that we're so quick to do the first, to, take something that's like so small and just be like, well, this is like who they are. And like, that's super unfair.
Yeah.
Because one, people change. You don't know, what could have happened,
right.
Within any moment. And so you just end up being like, okay, like this is who they are, and I'm going to take that, and I'm going to take that forever. And then like for the other person that you've painted this picture of, you don't give them the opportunity to like have correction in that. You
don't. Because even if I'm trying to change it or improve it, you still see that. Like you still see me as that.
Yeah, exactly. The perfect example in my life is going back to the late thing.
You are just that is
you. But there was a it's not about being late, but about like not showing up. And there was a season of my life, and it was going off to college, that I, with like one of my best friends in the whole entire world, her and I we spent so much time together before I went off to college that. And I think I've spoken about her in previous episodes, that we almost stopped being friends because I just could not show up. I couldn't be there and all of these things. And there was a moment that it was like said to me that like, you just don't care about me. But there was like, I was in school. I was a collegiate athlete. Like I was living in a town like far away. And there was just like so many like elements that were involved. Yeah. But there was a moment that I was written off as, you don't care and you never show up. And it's like, that's not fair, and that's not true, whatsoever. But it could have been easy for me on the other end to be like, well, you don't take into consideration my life. Right. And you don't show up for me. That's what I needed from you, is for you to show up for me in that way, and to recognize, or even just to offer like, hey, I want to understand. Right. Why you're not showing up.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then it goes to, like, I guess, like, that kind of clears up the idea that it's someone else that creates a narrative and not us. Like, we can think that we're, portraying a type of person, any given moment. But it's up to, the opposer, you know what I mean? It's up to the external person to kind of say, like, this is where I choose to see Jasmine, like in this time, you know what I mean? And like you said, it could be just a time. I've definitely had those seasons where I'm like, I am very much head down, getting some work done. I need to focus on this thing. And I'm not like able to have relationships. I'm not able to like consider your time. Yeah. I'm not able to show up for the holidays. Like, and if you chalk that up as me not caring or not being a family person or not being whatever or not having time, I got to take that L because this is a season of my life that I have to, you know what I mean? But like I said, it goes back to that person that is like narrating the story. You know, it's like they get to decide what you are. They get to, and you would hope that it's a genuine, you're considering my time. You know that I'm busy in college. You know that I have things to do or whatever. You would hope that's it. But reality is sometimes it's not.
That's true. What do you do when you find out?
What do you mean?
Like that someone like created a narrative? Because some people do and you never know.
Well, I mean, like, what can you do if they're so stuck in it? There's only two options. Like, can I clear this up, or do I let it control our relationship? That's literally one of the two. It's like if I find out that, you know, and I mean, I've been in this position, like, a situation has happened, and like, my family has thought this of me, and I'm like, why? Like, what? I know I don't present myself as that, but either your narrative is created by secondhand information,
right,
or something that you've misinterpreted that happened a long time ago that you didn't bother to clear up. Like, that's fake news. Like, I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do I do? So it's like, I could hope that there's like adult moments that lead to conversations of, hey, let me clear this up. That did not happen, and that was not the intention, or this isn't true, that you might, whatever you might have heard.
Yeah.
I would hope that there's room for that. But that's not always the case. No. So if it isn't, I have to be okay with you like comfortably creating that narrative. That's I mean, what can I do about that?
Yeah. There really isn't much. I think that's the sad reality, of it. And like, I had like written down, like, letting someone create a false narrative of you is a small price to pay for having rid yourself of their toxicity. So it's like, if you've seen that they've created this narrative of you and it doesn't get cleared up, but you cut them off, like, you're reading toxicity, but there's something small that this narrative could go a little bit further.
Right.
And it's almost like there is a little hope that whoever hears this extension of this narrative either comes to you, but there's also, that other possibility that could just end up lingering and continue to follow you. Because I know that in my life, that's been my narrative, is that there has been a lot of people that have believed a certain narrative that somebody has said about me, and that's something that I continue to face. But usually when I do face it, I recognize I don't owe you an explanation about who I am, because you're so content with what the narrative that person told you. So instead of you actually approaching me and wanting to have a conversation about it, you just wanted to tell me, what did that do for both parties here?
But I mean, like, going to your point earlier, is like, it's a price. It's that's worth the price. If that's like, sometimes you kind of like have to let things happen and realize, like, I can't, because okay, here's what I think is, like, the saddest thing is when you are friends with somebody, or you're in a relationship with somebody, or you have family that we've been good so far, but then this one thing happens and now my credibility is shot. And now the narrative changes. And now all of a sudden you forgot how loving I was before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you're kind of like, well, thanks for showing me that. And, when you talk about just the price you pay for their toxicity, is like, all right, well, season is up here. I look at narratives, like, I guess, like, outside narratives as filters, because I think they could be in positives too. Like, so, like, my husband loves me and literally is like, I think he's like looking through a Snapchat filter with like all the hearts, like, you know what I mean? Because I'm like,
all the heart emojis.
Right. I'm like, I need to brush my teeth first. Just chill. You know what I mean? So it's like, I know that there's even my kids, like, I'm like, they're probably like, she can't do any wrong. You know what I mean?
For sure they have that attitude,
I'll like, tap my son, or like flick him from the behind. And, my husband will be sitting in the living room, but I'll do it in the kitchen. And in my son's mind, my mother would never do that. But my dad, that guy. Yeah. So he'll like run in here like, Daddy, did you do that? Like, I'm like, that makes no sense. But he can't fathom, like, why would my mom ever...
Yeah, she's
She
perfect.
she won't trick me. Like,
Right.
that's my dad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I look at, like, that's in a positive light. But then there are negative things where it creates this filter, like we have this one bad situation, or you heard some messed up information that could be true, could not be true. And who's to say I would have done that to you if that was you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We never know, right? There's all kind of ways. But, you know, you hear this secondhand information and now you see me differently. Because, you know, you ever hear these, it's like, I heard that Shon did this. You know what? I can see her doing that. And it's like now all of a sudden it makes sense. It makes sense to you that Shon could be doing this thing, right? And you never thought that of me before, but you have no idea why I did that in this interaction with this person.
Yeah.
And but now there's a filter. So now you have a narrative of, you know what? I did think something fishy, but isn't that weird?
My mind is so blown because I'm thinking of all instances, even like instances I've said like, oh yeah, I could see that. And I'm like, no.
Oh, see, you're guilty.
Like,
don't we do that? It's like,
it's like, I hate how second nature that is.
It
is, because
though.
we've allowed ourselves to just like say those things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like so often.
And there's nothing wrong with reacting. It's just the idea that like, how are we coming back from that? Like, how are we saying, okay, I don't know why that happened. That's between y'all. And you know what I mean? Like, we have so many people that were in relationships that they didn't belong in and they just were not healthy.
Right.
And then they separated and got to a new relationship and they're like, you know, this is I'm a better person because of it. That to me makes sense because you're in your better atmosphere now. But there are people that are going to define you for what happened before.
Yeah. Not
realizing that we can be different people in different situations. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because there's so many factors that involve that oftentimes, like, we just don't know, we don't see, we don't understand, you know. Oh, you really got me stuck there. You know, thinking about the phrase that you just said. I could see that. Like, ugh.
And now, like, doesn't it make you, like, check yourself? Like, you're like,
literally, I don't want to be. My whole head.
I don't want to be that. Like, I don't want to be that person.
No.
Because I don't think that of the people in my life. Like, I don't think that they are intentionally who they are. Like, there's so many people in my family that I never thought I would have the relationship I have with them now. You know what I mean? And it took for both of us to grow up to, like, I talk about her in, like, a few episodes, but my cousin Kiana is literally, like, a person I never knew I would speak to so often and in so much depth.
Yeah.
Like, the conversations we have, I'm like, oh my God, like, where have you been all my life?
Yeah.
But we both had to get to a certain age and a certain, like, distance away from toxicity, I think, to, like, have these crazy conversations that lead to so much wisdom.
Yeah. Because
we both come from different interactions, you know what I mean? And so when I look at that kind of thing, I'm just like, you never know. Like, if we just give it a chance that there's so much growth and we can be different if we let go of what we thought of that person or let go of what we assumed our future would look like with that person.
Yeah.
I get to change the narrative. I get to say, like, wow, like, you aren't what, you know what I mean? I'm not going to put you in this box of my expectation.
Right.
I'm not going to put you in this, like, I'm not going to hold you to this one situation or what they said about, you know what I mean?
Right. Secondhand information.
Right.
Like you said, like a moment, or even, you know, something that so often, like how the phrase goes is, you know, first impressions are everything. I'm starting to realize,
sick, though.
Yeah, I don't believe that phrase. Like, are first impressions important? Sure. In certain contexts. But it's like to, like, be able to create a narrative or say, like, based off of my first impression of them, this is who I believe they are. That's so unfair. I actually seen a tweet the other day, not gonna lie, it literally said, I think that I'm over interviews. And I was like, one, yes, that stuff is exhausting. But two,
I agree.
Yeah, it was just more of, you know, just like looking through the thread that people were just saying, like, you base so much off of who an individual is off of one moment. That's not even over an hour. Like, that is just, like, so crazy to me. And so when I sit there and I think of that concept, I'm like, how it could look different, hard to say, not sure. But, you know, there are opportunities of growth, or, you know, that you can have with somebody, you know, like you said. I know with my sister, her and I both had very different narratives about who each other was. Both my sisters, actually. And I think I'm the oldest, and both my sisters are, you know, 21, so I'm like, they're young little whippersnappers.
You are not far off.
Love them to death. But it's so funny because I look at them now and I'm like, you have so much life.
Oh,
but it's like just totally different. They're so cute. But, you know, I think with both of my younger sisters, all of us had these, like, certain narratives of each other. With one of my sisters, it was definitely based off of, like, interactions that we had with each other. And so that where we both contributed, right? With my other sister, it wasn't interactions that we had with each other. It was external things that we were hearing. So it's been super interesting for, you know, me to come together with both of them and to grow through those moments with them. And also, like, the biggest thing that we had to recognize and, like, be very honest and lay down is, this is what I believe about you. Is this true or not? And it takes a lot of, like, self-reflection and really just, like, you know, honesty and transparency going into that, to be like, maybe not my best quality, but yeah, that is something, you know, that I would say is maybe ingrained in who I am, but it's not who I want to be. I aspire to be, you know, different. Or, you know, with my other sister, it's more of like, hey, I just, like, really want to know who you are, because I actually never had that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so it's really, you know, there's growth looks different in different spaces.
Yeah. But, you know, something you just kind of like, I love my son.
But we could take him out. I'm just kidding. Let me not say
that. Something you just mentioned is, like, you creating that moment. Like, earlier we talked about those interactions that we create, and they could, like, debunk the narratives. They could, it could just be your contribution to, I hope that I'm debunking. I hope that, like, I'm creating a space where you can improve any negatives that you have in my narratives. But you know, you were talking, having that conversation, sitting down and saying, I want to get to know this. I don't want the interaction to be the main thing. I don't want the interaction to control this. Or, you know, on the other side of, like, hey, like, I want to forget the external things and I want to be able to focus on us. And you taking that time and taking that step, like, that's what I think is really important. But then the sad thing is, we cannot control what other people think after that.
Nope.
You know what I mean? And
yeah.
So earlier you were asking that, and I just kind of wanted to bring that up. And you know, it all comes down to, like, what is the reason that we're so invested in other people's narratives? Like, simply put, like, why do we care? And, like, what is it that makes us feel like I have to abide by or subscribe to your narrative? Like, I think all the people that we're talking about are close friends and family. Like, we're not, I can care less about what anybody outside that circle thinks.
Yeah.
But like, why do you think you care?
I think for me, my thing is that I think I've always, like, equated, like, my recognition with, like, my self-worth. You know, like, I put my self-worth in, you know, these individuals in my life. And so, like, my investment is, like, I needed to be seen in this particular way for me to be worthy to you. And that, like, I mean, operating in that for so long, I wouldn't say I operated in that way anymore, but, like, looking back, I'm like, man, like, I did not have opportunity to just be myself, to be who I wanted to be, to present myself. And so now it's like putting my worth in those people and their expectations and what they, you know, thought that I should be, or even what I thought that I was supposed to be for them, without people outright saying those expectations, because I think that we can do that too at times. But in doing so, I realize it's almost like I just faked it for so long, and then now I'm trying to, like, undo that. Yeah. And that is exhausting. Well, yeah. And that is, like, just way too much. Like, and so it's just, like, super challenging. That's something that I had to walk through, because, now, I'm having to go back, or, if I end up being in conversations with people and being like, yeah, so like I acted like this and this is entirely not who I am, and I wish I never had done that, and operated in that space. And so
that accountability,
exactly. And so for me, like, just to put it simply, is like I just put my self-worth, I was so invested in this, and I ended up putting my self-worth in all the wrong things.
Golly, like, that's exhausting. Dang, that's exhausting. But it's like, I mean, that's what we do. And I mean, I guess the fault is ours because, what child doesn't grow up wanting to match the expectation of their family, or, like the narrative of their family. I think for me, it's a matter of, well, first it's like, I want what you're saying to be true. Like, I want and I'm talking about family members, elders, parents, right?
Right.
I want, if it's positive, I want to be doing whatever I need to do to walk into your narrative of me.
Right.
My dad is like one of those outwardly proud dads. And like, although a kid would think it's embarrassing, my dad, like, that's his way of showing that he cares.
Yeah.
Like my mom's not like that. I think that she's very much like reserved. Like, I wouldn't mind if she was like, that's my daughter. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, my dad is like, and I said this before, my dad is like the guy that stole a bullhorn from somebody, when in my college graduation, and like stopped the whole ceremony to say, how proud he is of me. And I'm like, I wonder if they can kick me out of college even after I've finished because of this man. But then I realized, like, that's him being proud.
Yeah.
So it's like, there's so much that happens that we want to match up to what that narrative is. But then when it comes to the negatives, you're like, I can't, I either have to take that step that you're talking about and try to fix it and try to convince you against what you are strongly believing.
Yeah.
Or I step back and say, ain't nothing I can do about that. Yeah. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and I was like telling her just like things that I had been struggling with. And at the end of it, I said, people are going to people. Like, there's nothing I could do about that.
Yeah. Yep.
And I can't invest in your narrative of me because it's not a promising thing. Like, you're going to decide what you're going to decide. Yeah. I could either sit on the phone or sit in your face for hours and convince you not to. But like I said before, it's a filter. It's what you've decided. You've contemplated long enough, and you have made me out to be the villain, right? Or you've made me out to be the enemy in this, or the faulty, or whatever character that is.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like a gamble. Like, yes, initially, I think it's always safe to say, hey, I hope you don't get the wrong idea. This is how I feel. And this was not, to be, this wasn't an intentional action in that way.
Right.
That's always safe to start off with. After that, I can't.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I was telling you earlier, like, my husband had when he first met some people that I went to college with, I didn't know that they felt this way, but they were telling him, like, they were like, yeah, like, in college, like, she didn't have time for anybody. Like, she just wasn't here for the mess. They said she showed up, and I was super blessed to be on the board and help create 3 major organizations on campus that were like Black based, which I'm like so grateful for. But if I wasn't contributing to those things, or in class, I was either at one of my 2 jobs, or I was trying to get some sleep or do some homework. Like, that was literally my life in college. So I get what their narrative was, is like, she didn't have time for, like, she wasn't fooling with nobody. I wasn't in the mess with the guys. And you didn't hear about me on the streets. You didn't hear about, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they were just like, she was about her business, and I was social enough to be involved, but I went home. And I realized, like, I can see why you guys thought that.
Yeah.
I can see it. And it wasn't anything negative. It was like, I can see the interactions I created that makes you say, that's who she was. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so when I look at that, like, whatever that ends up being, negative, positive, or whatever, I just am at a point in my life now that I'm like, you're gonna think what you're gonna think.
Yep.
I have no control after that.
Mm-hmm. This is what you... Okay, so that moves into kind of what you just shared. Like, the next one is, like, have you detached your goals or, like, your future self from others' expectations of you or narratives of you? And if you have, give us some tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks. You know what's funny is, like, I think that's, like, it's almost seasonal because, and I can say in some areas of my life I have. And then some areas, just this year alone, I had to, like, or this last year, what are we in, 2022?
I know.
Like, I'm like...
We're already 3 months in, my goodness.
Like, I'm like, what year is it? But you know what? In some ways, I had. In a lot of other ways, I'm still learning. So, like, you know, late teens, early 20s, I had to learn that missing out on holidays, missing out on family events, and not being present for life events for people was very, very sad and hurtful. But after so many, you're never around, or you don't care about us, or, you know, you don't have time for us. After so many of those, I was like, I can't compromise school.
Yeah.
Like, I have to get out of here. And I mean, I grew up in a situation where I was like, I can't go back to that.
Right.
So my motivation had to, like, trump what people were thinking.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean it happened overnight. It was hard. It was like, at first it was like I was busting my butt to be there and there.
Yeah.
Just so I can prove to you, you know, that I do have time. I do love you. I really, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you kind of said it earlier, is like, I needed for people to understand that, you know what I mean? And, you know, I remember my godmom, she was just so understanding. Like, she was like, you got a whole life outside of us, so I'll get you whenever I can.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'll get whatever time I can. And she's still like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, even now I'm like,
she's the best.
I just want to bother her. I just want to be under her. And she's like, I understand. You got a whole I'm like, forget them. It's me and you.
Like, thanks for being so understanding, but stop. Stop.
I'm like, but so, like,
you do that. You do that to me.
I know.
You're like, I know, I get it.
I know. I'm like, you're so busy. Like, right?
No,
and see, now I do it to you. But so it's that stage for me was hard because I spent a lot of time, I lost sleep, girl, trying to correct that. But then it's like, as an adult, I'm like, you can't pull that card with me now. I have children, and I have a husband, and I have a career, and I got stuff to do, and I'm gonna have to disappear, you know. And I haven't lived in the same state as my family in, golly, you know, 10, 12 years. So it's like, I can't even, you gonna miss me with all that. That can no longer be your narrative. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's not an overnight thing, but it is something that, like, I struggled with in different ways. Now it's a matter of, even though I'm distant, trying to be as present as I can be, but then detaching, like, being taken advantage of. So we talk about, like, what those goals look like. Like, I might do really good, you know, focusing on my work and being okay with not being there for the family event.
Yeah.
Now, though, like, I'm dealing with, like, the emotional aspect of, do I have enough in me to, like, emotionally be present for you?
Yeah.
Or am I drained because you've done so much to me? Right? And so that personal goal for me looks like, Shon, you got to throttle back and give yourself time to, like, refocus and revamp.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, like, you know, you're going to struggle. You're going to suffer. So that goal to me is taking a break away from the drainage.
Yeah.
Taking a break away from that. So I'm learning that even now. So when you ask, like, how does that affect or compromise, like, those future goals? I had to learn in segments, dude. Like, it wasn't this overall lesson.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, I learned the business aspect of it. Cool. I learned the separating family from business, or separating family from school. Cool. I learned keeping my marriage first and my family first, and then that. Cool. Now it's like my emotional goals, my emotional, like, boundaries. That's where I am now. And it's like, once I get that, I think I'll be a better person.
She's gonna have the master class.
But
We are ready.
Right,
Yeah.
but that's how I have to see it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
What about you?
No, that's just so many things of what you said is so good. I just really want to highlight. I love that you said that it's seasonal, because I think that so often, and I think I share this, is like, we want things to be like a blanket. We want it to be like, this happens, it happens overnight, and it's beautiful. But the reality is, it just does not look like that. You know, for me, I think that I was hurt so young that I just reached a point to where, like, emotionally, that is where I really had to put deep investment first. Because if I didn't go there first, I wouldn't know how to operate anywhere else. Just like how my mind and my brain works. And, you know, because I had, just to be so candid, is like, my dad painted this picture of who I was, who I am, you know, to some of our family and also to people within my community. And that was even more tarnishing, because it's like, I can't walk down the street, can't go to a store without somebody, you know, saying something to me or all of these things, where so I'm constantly on alert. That is absolutely insane. But so I reached a point to where I just recognized that all of these expectations that were like on me was so emotionally damaging to me, that when I left for college, it was the very first time I moved from home, lived in the same house my whole life, all the things, and I was like, yep, I'm ready to like make a change and like to go hard in this. And was it something that happened overnight? No, absolutely not. But I reached a moment where I had to believe and have the confidence in myself that I could change my narrative.
Yeah.
Because for so long I was like, well, I guess if a lot of people believe that's who I am, that's who I am. And I think that there was, I wish that there was more people in my life to help push me out of that, because I think that's not necessarily to tell me who I am, but more to encourage me to dig deep into who I believe that I am, right? And so, yeah, just like when I got to college, it was such a pivotal moment for me, because I no longer had this attitude of like, okay, you know what I mean? I'm gonna let you have this one. I was like, no, like, I'm no longer gonna let you have this. And so I really had to believe that I could control my narrative. I had to tune out a lot of the noise, because it didn't stop. It hasn't stopped, even in my life today. Like, I'm still, you know, there. It's not like, again, don't emotionally have this thing figured out. There is
I know,
a whole lot, you know, like, there's so much.
We're both struggling there, so.
Right. Like, if you're in with us.
But then, let me challenge you, and you can fight me later. Because I know how you like to tussle. But, it's, you know, you kind of said, like, hey, like, me controlling my narrative, or even doing the work to do that, isn't it initially intimidating, but then later on, like, carefree, that not everybody wants you to be a better person or have a better narrative. Like, you're talking about, like, this aspect of other people creating this narrative of you. What if they're comfortable with that? Because how dare you be better than me? Or how dare you come from the same place I've come from and you exceed what I was trying to do? Why would you assume that you know what I mean? And so, you know, you speak about controlling your narrative. Like, keep in mind, not everybody wants you to have a better narrative. Like, I had to learn that the hard way.
Oh, yes.
Not everybody, like, wants that. So even if you go back, you know, because you talked about your father, it's like, even if you go back and you're able to connect with everybody else and save face, what if they're so on, you know, gung-ho for him, team him, and, you know, if he's painted you as a victim in any situation, or anybody, not even just, you know, not even that, but, like, what if they're so team them? It doesn't matter. I don't want you to win. So, like, I'm fine with what I already believe.
And
like,
I'm fine with you believing that.
Exactly. I think like, that's the place you have to.
Yeah, I think that's the state of being that you have to be in, is that I am fine at this point believing with where you're at, because if that's what you believe about me, you're actually not somebody that I want in my life. I had read something that said, if I wouldn't let you in my house, why would I let you in my mind?
Boom. Boom.
It's,
that's it.
You know, it's something that it's just such a simple phrase, but it's so impactful, you know, because it's like, if you're not allowed, because it's like your home is your safe, that's your place, that's your safe space, you know, like, we are serious about our homes.
Absolutely.
We don't just be like that. I'm
Absolutely.
like, I'll meet you in a
I'll meet
neutral
you
zone.
halfway.
Right? Exactly.
Listen.
You know, but yeah, it's just, you have to reach the place where you're like, that's fine by you. And I also, for me, I reached a place of, I'm not defending myself anymore. You know,
Absolutely
speaking
not.
to this, you know, particular individual that's in my life, I tried to have an open conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that entirely failed.
Yep.
And I was like, that's fine.
I tried.
Because within this, you can never say that I didn't, you know, put my foot forward.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, at the end of the day, I am proud in my success and where my life is going.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud to bring along the people in my life who are proud of me as well.
Absolutely.
You know, and so it's like, at this point, everybody else is dead weight.
That's true. I think that I'm going to, like, yeah. You and I spoke about this, I want to say, like, episode 2 or probably 1, because it was like we were introducing just the dynamic, you know, of our relationship. And I do remember a narrative that was created about you when I came into this family. And I remember that narrative, and I remember how invested I was in it, because I was like, I'm new here. This must be true. Mm-hmm. Everybody's saying it. And then when I started to do digging myself, I was like, what happened that, what could have happened that everybody believes this lie? Mm-hmm. So, like, what could have happened? And it showed me the power of, like, gossip and lies. Yeah. It showed me the power of, like, of someone taking a situation and twisting it. Mm-hmm. It was crazy. I remember calling you and I was like, you got to tell me the truth. Yes. What did you do to these people?
Yeah. Like, y'all would have thought that I killed somebody and buried the body, and like,
I genuinely, and we laugh about it now, but I genuinely remember, like, being told the narrative. First of all, meeting you, falling in love with you, and then having this relationship, and then being, like, told this narrative and being fed this, like, really negative narrative. Yeah. And no one told me any different. Like, everybody seemed to believe this thing. Mm-hmm. And this was, you know, you were in high school, you were living your best life. Like, it wasn't right. You know, I was trying to be cute. You was trying to be cute. And, like, I remember being so, like, confused. Mm-hmm. Because I was like, oh my God, something must have happened. This is some big family secret I just don't know about. Yeah. And so I'm guilty, right? I believed this narrative because I was like, why would my new in-law family, like, be so... Right. They're the greatest. Why would they say these things? And so anyway, I believed it long enough. That's all that matters. Yeah. And I had to, like, repent because I called Jasmine and I was like, what lie could have been told or happened for this to be such a narrative? And so when I look at that, I'm like, there's so much power in in people wanting to believe the worst about you. Yeah. There's so much because I get to use that as a filter and I get to use that as an excuse to spread bad things. I get to, like, convince everybody else that you are this. Mm-hmm. And that's like, there's nothing. Jasmine couldn't have done anything about it. Let me be honest. She knew that. Like, she couldn't have done anything about it.
It was a Kanye shrug moment.
It really was. And it was one of those things that even though you were young, like, I know it hurt you. Yeah. But, like, even if she sat everybody down and convinced them otherwise, like, there was nothing she could do. Mm-mm. And I started to understand why she wasn't coming around and why she chose not to be in that atmosphere. Yeah. And so that was the point where I was like, I got to make it to you because I know now I get it. Mm-hmm. So when I look at that situation, it's so clear why A, we can't do anything about the narratives. Right. B, like, investing so much in them, it's only going to bring us down.
That's it.
It is, but there's really people, there really are times when people make it their mission. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? To create this lie. You know what I mean? It's
I know we've said it, and I feel like I can't say it enough, but, like, you know, there's just so many times that people create narratives about others because of their past, because of their shortcomings, because of their hurt, because of, you know, or because of even, like, their successes back in the day, but it doesn't look the same now. So
Exactly.
it's how weird is it? Is like there's something that's like almost like so positive in your life, but you created it something that's so negative in the future. Super bizarre. It doesn't really like, I'm like, in my head, A plus B does not equal, you know.
And you feel comfortable continuing with that, like, that preset. Like, you feel comfortable.
I really like that analogy. Like, you got filters and you got presets, and these are stuck, and there's no wavering. There's no wavering whatsoever. But I think the thing that's sad, and you know, in moments, you know, we've admittedly said like we are guilty to you know, tapping into these things as well. And I know that in moments that I recognize where I've been guilty of that, in my heart, that kills me. Oh, it kills me so much. But
you recognize it now. And now you're like, dang it, like, I don't want to do that. Because you know how it feels.
Yes.
But think of all the people that are struggling with even, like, the awareness of that.
Yeah.
And that's a normal thing. Like, no, none of this is to bash anything. It's just to bring awareness to, like, we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it at some point.
Yeah.
And it's going to just take a few steps to acknowledge and improve it. Because it doesn't feel good at all. No. You know what I mean? And, you know, just going back to what we were talking about earlier, yes, there are things that we can do to contribute to interactions with people. I'm not saying this is all like, everybody's your hater and you got 10 million. I'm not saying that. Like, that's you know what I mean? We love to be like, everybody hating on me.
Right.
That's not always the case. But there are things that we do in our personality. I'm talking about as a general, like, that create or that contribute to certain things. The important thing, I think, is that we take accountability for, like I said, our contribution to our relationships. Nobody is saying that, like, we can't go wrong and we can't do anything to create, like, a negative interaction. It's just the idea that if we're aware we're doing something to hurt a relationship, say something, try to fix it. After that, though, like, I can't control how you see me. You know what I mean? And I think that's the hold up there is, you know, there's so many relationships that I have where I'm almost like, I'm surprised to know that's what you think of me. Now, there are relationships that I've failed where I didn't do what I could have done to contribute positively. Like, I voluntarily, you know, had these interactions that, I could see why you have that narrative. Like, you know what I mean?
For sure.
Because whether we intentionally do it or not, there's things that we do that we're like, I remember when that happened, and I see why you think that of me.
Or even if you don't want to forgive me.
If you don't, and that's fine. That's fine. So, like I said, I'm just going back to the idea that narratives are something other people get to and sadly do have. They get to have those of us. Whether they're positive or negative, they get to have those of us. And you would just hope that, you know, the narrative is in good hands. Like, you would hope that it's coming from a pure place of, man, like, I think this is a great person who sometimes make mistakes, but I know that overall they're a great person. Or I think she's a great friend, but, you know, I know that this is a busy time in her parent life or in her momhood. And that's why we aren't able to do the things, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. I know for a fact I'm a bad guy in a couple people's story. And, you know, I'm going to take that L.
You're like, you know what, it is what it is.
But it's like, that's the beautiful thing about maturity and about growth is that, you know, we can, you know, carry forward the way that we want to interact with people, the narrative that we want to carry, you know, like, and have, like I mentioned earlier, like, for me, is like, I have this confidence that I can, you know, be in control to the extent that I have, to my, you know, ability. Because once it's in the other person's hand, you do have to recognize there's no control there, but it's like, you know, take care of your house.
Like, I've done all I can do. And if you know that you intentionally, like, or that you've purposed for positive things, then, like I said, I just hope it's in good hands. You know what I mean?
And I always have to remind myself, you're not everybody's person. You're not everybody's cup of tea. Like, I think that's like
a reality.
That's a really big thing, and I think for some, that's a really hard reality to come to.
Dang. Well, then, yeah, I get it. That's a whole other thing. It's like, well, that's a part, like, I guess that's also a part of this is it's going to take for you to realize that, for you to know that your narrative just isn't, it doesn't look good.
No.
You know, like I said, with my husband, you know, it looks different than it might look with, you know, a family member that is still looking at me sideways from something that happened 15 years ago. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Like, well,
you never know, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But you have to accept that. So dang, like the whole cool thing about this conversation is like there's things that we can do to hurt a relationship. B, whether we positively recover from that, whether we're aware, whether we process that internally, and you know confront this in the most positive way and apologize or clear up, we have to realize that we cannot control the filter people see us in, or the interactions or negatives or moments that they choose to hang on to.
Yeah.
Because going back to that, you never know why they feel the way they feel. And if I am going to defend the person creating the narrative, you know, what if I've struggled with people always letting me down? And now you being late so many times it makes me attach you to all the other people that let me down. And so I'm categorizing you now.
Right. It's a trigger.
It's a trigger.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm categorizing you now. And now I put you along with everybody else. And you're not my real friend. Right?
Yeah.
That's a realistic narrative, or that's a realistic thing because something they're struggling with. So it's also accepting and trusting that everybody has some process, some algorithm, some equation as to why they have to see you the way that they see you.
Yeah.
And it's going to take your effort to, if you really are, you know, invested in this relationship, because some of them you're like, I don't care.
Right.
But it's going to take your contribution and your awareness and you know, and clearing that up. B, it's out of your hands, right? And then how are we learning from it so that the next time it happens, we can either see that, hey, you're a toxic person, or you're probably getting a negative narrative of me gathered right now, or I'm just going to do my best to make sure that I've created true and positive interactions between the two of us.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so good. I love that. Those are you crushed it. Those are the best takeaways, man. Like, it's plain and simple. We hope that you guys enjoyed this conversation. You know, what are narratives that you've seen in your life that show up over and over again? We would love to know, you know, just out of curiosity, because I think that's the way that we learn and grow together is like when we have moments to relate to one another. So let us know. We say it every episode, but if there was something that you guys are like, y'all are so wrong on that, tell us. We want to know.
Tell us.
We really want to know because, you know, the conversations we have in the car, like you said, like we bouncing, you know, ideas off each other. We had lunch yesterday and we were just like ping-ponging, with each other. And it was amazing. But, you know, we're so grateful for you guys. We're grateful that you give us this space, you know, to whether you're watching us or we're in your ears. Just know that we love you guys and we put so much into this, you know, that we can, so that we can provide you guys with the best conversations. So,
yeah. And like she said, you know, we look forward to your feedback. You know, what are the narratives and what did you realize? Because, I mean, we just had to have a moment of self-reflection. What narratives have you created about people that you need to detach those instances and understand their true intentions or who they really are, you know? So if you feel so bold, comment.
Yes.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, you know, like, hit us up in our inbox if you feel like, I don't want nobody to know how guilty I am of this or how bad I struggle. Right. We're struggling too. But yeah, I agree. We just enjoy being able to have these conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.